Good morning, folks. I'm Tom McLaughlin, and we're here on Left and Right. It's Wednesday, September 11th, an ominous date. And with me, sitting in the left chair, is my friend, longtime friend,
that's right,
Jim Wilfong. And Jim lives in Stow, and he has an interesting background. He's a former state representative in Maine, and that's when I first met you, I think, in that capacity. Not in that capacity, but when you were in that job. And then you went to, you were selling skis and so forth, and other outdoor equipment.
We started
Let me finish this, and then you can speak. Let's see, then Jim and I, we would meet, and then we'd meet at the store, at the post office, wherever, and we'd start to talk about the politics of the current events of the day, and we would go on and on and on, and I'd be late getting home with my gallon of milk or whatever it was, and so and sometimes Harry Crosby would be sitting at the bar, and the counter, lunch counter, and Rose was now Rosie's, and so we decided, in order to maintain domestic tranquility, that we would make a time so we could, espouse various positions and issues and like that. And it formed into something in your field.
Yes. In
the gazebo you had in your field in Stow.
Still do.
So we called it, what are we going to call our group? The gazebo group. And so it was neat. It was we had a discussion group, a salon you might call it.
Yes.
And that went on for how long? 10, 12 years?
I think so.
Something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, and it was great. I miss it.
Yes.
So we did that, and Jim, let's see, then you went into, you're always in business, you traveled around, and then you went into the Small Business Administration, right, with the Clinton administration, and did that for a while. When I had your kids in school, I think that was about to happen.
Yes. And
then what?
I was trade secretary there.
Okay.
For small business.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you back to Stow and what am I leaving?
I was a trade advisor for George W. Bush.
Okay.
He appointed me as the small, medium-sized enterprise trade advisor to the Export-Import Bank.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So I know. You now teach entrepreneurship. And at University of Maine for a while.
I did at the University of Southern Maine.
Yeah.
For 15 years.
Okay, and then also at Freiburg Academy.
This is my 12th year.
Okay, you're still doing that. All right.
Yes.
And what else? You had been in the Marines when you were a young man, and what else am I leaving out here?
Well, that caused the veterans groups in D.C. to ask Barack Obama's administration to appoint me to a White House task force on veterans business development.
And you did that?
I did that. I chaired a working group of that for 5 years.
Clinton, Bush, Obama administration. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Wow.
Yeah, so it was fun.
Yeah.
I tried to contribute. I just see it as a chance to do something perhaps for people in the country.
So Jim and I have known each other a long time, and but back when I first met you, I was over on the left, and just emerging from my far left days, came to Maine, and thought I'd maybe be a missionary for the left in Maine in this Yankee country, but I went native. What happened? That's what I did. I went native. So that started my journey back across center, and now I'm way over on the right, which is why I'm sitting in this chair with Bill Buckley and Ronald Reagan behind me. And Jim has always been somewhat left of center, then center left. Would that describe you?
I think so. If you looked at it in its entirety, and some things I would be looked at as quite conservative when it comes to financial stuff. Other things on the environment, maybe I'm a little further to the left than other people might be.
And we have. We've always gotten along.
Yes.
And we will, no matter what happens here, we will always get along.
We have to.
We do. We do.
The country depends on it.
It does.
People like ourselves getting along. It depends on it. We can't.
The American public likes for its politicians to get along. Not that you're a former politician.
Yes.
Matter of fact, that just reminded me of something.
But you are too. Weren't you on the Board of Selectmen
yeah.
over in Lovell?
Yeah,
I'm
was.
on the Board of Selectmen now in Stow.
Okay, all right. So that is a good way to be a politician, I think, because you're
Yes.
dealing with people you know and you see every day, and they
Yes.
hold you accountable.
Yes, they do.
On every little issue.
They do.
Yeah.
Whether you're accountable or not.
Yeah, well, you have to be able to come up with an answer when people ask you a question
You
or
do.
challenge you. Why
You
did
do.
you vote this way?
You do.
Yeah, you do.
You do.
Yeah,
There's no
and-
question.
Yes, yes. So it's so why? Oh, on the night that Bill Clinton was elected,
Yeah.
1992,
Yeah.
I was at your house.
You
And
were.
You were
Oh, yeah.
running. You were running for the state senate at the time.
I did in
And
1992.
so we were waiting for the results
Right.
from your race and the presidency, and of course all
Yes.
the others that But
Yes.
So yeah, and I voted for Clinton in 1992. So that was about when I guess probably I was just still a little bit left of center at that point. But I've been moving to the right ever since.
Yeah.
And it's when that's how long ago? 27 years ago.
Wow, it's been a while now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a strange thing. I never contributed 25 cents to Bill Clinton. So for me to wind up working in his administration was really kind of interesting. But I supported, always been a free market kind of guy, a rules-based market economy.
All right.
And I've always been a deficit hawk.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wow.
I
All
have
right.
always Bill Clinton was really good about
Last
trying
president to balance the budget. Yeah.
and to run surpluses to pay down the debt.
Yep. Yep.
So I was
Those were
I
the
was
good old
that.
days.
Those were the good old days. Yes.
All right. So we're going to do question number one. 'cause
Okay.
That's what he wants us to do.
Sure.
Now, neither of us has seen this.
No.
And let's see. Here we go. Before a Taliban bomb killed a U.S. soldier, President Trump had invited representatives from the Taliban to meet with him at Camp David for peace talks during the week of 9/11. That's right, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think that the United States should be brokering peace deals with the Taliban on U.S. soil? You can take it, or I will.
Well, I'll take it. My own thoughts on it would be no. We should be doing that somewhere else. I do think we got to talk to people.
Yeah.
And even in World War II, we had backdoor communications with the Germans and, through Switzerland. And so we do need to be talking to people. But I think inviting them to Camp David wasn't the right thing. That's my own personal opinion. But I do applaud efforts to try and figure this out. 18 years is way too long to be waging a war halfway around the world. That's my opinion.
Okay. I agree. To have those scumbags, and that's what they are,
Yeah.
on U.S. soil, and it's he's lowering himself as president of the United States. I don't know if he personally intended to meet with them. I'm not clear on that, or if he would have been. I think he should have sent John Bolton maybe to talk to them. But the former national security advisor, now former as of yesterday. Just because they're scumbags, just because of what they did and will do again if given the opportunity. We know they will. And do I trust that any kind of an agreement could be reached with which they would abide? I just don't. I have zero respect and zero trust for them. They see us as kufar and infidels, and they're pledged to kill us or convert us, and that's where they're at, and they haven't changed.
Well, I think that I think that the Afghan government deserves to be part of this discussion.
Oh, hell, yeah.
And I think they have been to some degree, although I have to admit I don't know exactly to what degree. But I think that they can have those discussions in a neutral place, and they could, as long as they have the Afghan government involved, having that discussion, as long as, we should also understand that the Afghan government needs to be involved, because these guys would go back to not having girls go to school and not having women in the legislature or the parliament, there are a number of women
They're
in
radical
the
Muslims,
Afghan.
and that's what would happen.
Yeah.
People would have to put their burqas back on and live, not accompany, not go out of the house without a male relative in their company. That's what we're dealing with.
They need to have
They
that.
do, and but okay, we've answered the question, so now we
Yeah.
can digress a little on the issue. And
Sure.
which you said, it's a long war. It's been 18 years,
Yeah.
and although it bugs me when President Trump says we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. I mean, do the math, Bill. I mean, September 11th, 2001, and this is 2019. I mean, it's not 20 years. It's 18 years, as you said.
Yeah.
But I've always seen, when I was teaching, it was going on. I mean, I've been retired since 2011. And it's, when teaching, current events, the Afghan War, okay? And then, then I'm teaching U.S. history in the 20th century, so Vietnam. And so there's so many parallels between Vietnam and only it wasn't, we're not fighting communism as we were in South Vietnam. We're fighting radical Islam or Islamism or whatever the current moniker would be. But we're propping up a weak government that hasn't got a lot of support among its constituents, and just like we did in so many different people in South Vietnam. And we tried to prop it up, and I think it was a losing proposition. Always had been. I mean,
right.
And it looks, and my sympathies are with Trump. Who wants to be the last guy to die there? To quote John Kerry in Vietnam, but who wants to? We just lost a guy, as the question preferred. And
what do we get? What is it what is really happening for us in a positive way? One of the things that I think is that we being the people and the Congress have given up too much power to the executive in allowing the executive to essentially declare war wherever they want. And the founders, as you know really well, the founders intended that Congress had the power, and that's where it ought to be, because if you need to have the people's support. Now, I think the people supported after 9/11. The people supported trying to figure it out, and it's not simple when we're not talking about a nation state. We're talking about
collection of tribes.
Collection, and in some cases, just. What they call in the State Department non-state actors. And you know what I mean? It's some group, and wherever they're getting shelter is whatever country, it's where they hang out. So I think we had to chase them down, but I do think, and I do think there was congressional support and support from the people, but it's been a long time. And before we commit troops, and send Marines and soldiers and sailors off to fight in some place, we ought to know exactly what we're doing and how we're going to get out of there and what the goals are, and we ought to have the support of the American people.
And go full tilt
there
until you reach those goals,
yes.
and then get out.
And then get out.
Or don't go at all.
Or don't go at all.
We're on the same page.
We're on the same page.
Yep, good. Okay, I remember where I was on September 11th. You can tell me. First I'll tell you.
Yes.
It was, I was in my classroom, and I had just taken the chalk off the blackboard. I had written the word jihad. And I just, and Joe Sargan, the principal, comes to the door. I go outside, and he told me, he said, let me take over your class. He said, I want you to go downstairs, because the 6th grade teachers had TV on. Their kids they had period off, and they're watching. As after the second plane hit the tower. Now, I had the word jihad on there because there had been a suicide bomb go off in Jerusalem, and there had been part of a series of them.
Sure.
And so I'm trying to get, it's September, beginning of the year, and and radical Islam was an issue, and so, but mostly for the Israelis at that time, although here too. And so I'm explaining what motivates somebody to blow himself up just to kill Jews in this case. And so I'm explaining the concept of jihad as radical Muslims define that. And that's why I had it up there, coincidentally. And then I knew right away, Osama bin Laden. And I'd been showing my students a tape, who is Osama bin Laden, or the hunt for Osama bin Laden, because he had blown up. Well, he was operating in the Sudan, when the film was made. And so, yeah, I've been on top of that, and I've been ever since.
Well,
Where were you?
Yeah, no, I know exactly. Valerie and I were taking a walk in Stow. It was a beautiful day, if you remember, with not a cloud in the sky.
Beautiful. Tuesday morning, yes, nice, crystal clear.
It was excellent. And we walked into the Stow store to get a cup of coffee after we'd taken our circle.
Yep.
And
you walked all the way from your house to the store? Okay, it's not too far.
It's about a mile and a half,
yeah, all right. Yeah.
So we walked into the Stow store to get a cup of coffee, and Al Wright owned the store at the time, and Al said, a plane's just flown into one of the towers at the Trade Center. I said, what? And he said, yeah, I can't tell if it was a small plane or a big plane.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we were talking about it. I said, well, it couldn't be a big plane, because a big plane, the pilots aren't going to, or an airline, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there, we're looking at it, and there's smoke coming out of the building. And
so we had the TV on.
The TV was on. And then you saw the big plane coming to the next building. It was shocking. And I thought, during the Clinton administration, they were chasing around and looking for not only bin Laden, but others like bin Laden, and they knew about Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
And I had been, one of the responsibilities that I had was managing a program in Egypt. And for the administration, I had a department I was responsible for, but they started using me also for diplomatic work. And so I was managing this program, and I had been in, I had been coming from Russia, where I was managing another program, flying to Egypt, and I stopped in Naples, Italy. And when we stopped there, it was just supposed to be a quick stop. It was somebody from the consulate that was there and said, you have to come off the plane. We can no longer guarantee your safety in Egypt. You're not going, because they've just blown up the coal in Yemen.
Okay, yeah.
You remember in Yemen.
Port of Aden.
Yep. And so, all that stuff was an undercurrent that was going on.
Yep.
And of course, this is where it gets really confusing, because what we had, we were helping to defeat the Russians when they were in Afghanistan, and we had a very big war going on.
We did,
and it was not small at all. And we were using mujahideen to fight them, and we knew at the time. I always remember reading an article in the paper which it said they interviewed this mujahideen fighter who was kind of a leader, and he said the Russians. He said about the Russians, we understand one another. They take no prisoners. We take no prisoners.
Was that bin Laden?
And that wasn't bin Laden. It was another guy. But there were probably many of them, and we've I think where we sometimes get into trouble is we defeat the Russians, but then we sort of say, well, now we're out of there. The Russians are gone, and as a result, the Taliban started to rise up and took over.
The communists are gone.
The communists were gone, but not
KGB is still there. Or the remnants of it, Putin and so forth. But there's still this Cold War dynamic still going on.
Oh yes,
and that Putin will fund anyone, help anyone that will be a pain in our butt, and so that is what he'll do. And so right now it's Syria, and it's Iran, and it's so that's where that support comes from. We sent Stinger missiles to Afghanistan to defeat the Russians. Well, what is that? They would send the anti-aircraft surface-to-air missiles that can possibly even bring down our new F-35s to Iran, to maybe Turkey, and so the same kind of stuff is still going on,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
it is. It's the same stuff where it almost seems the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And I have to then wonder, I mean, being a trade person, at our number one export, it's arms. It's not
it really?
Number one export that we export
Arms.
is arms.
In dollar value.
In dollar value.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
It is. And it's disappointing, I mean.
Why?
Well, I think it's disappointing because I really think that, we get to a point where if we got into a major war, the world can't afford it. I mean, the arms are expensive. Bombs and guided missiles and bombs are not cheap. They're very, very expensive. And if we may not be, as we found out, we may not be like in World War II, where Hawaii got bombed and some parts in the Aleutians got bombed, were invaded. But we could wind up seeing ourselves losing buildings and infrastructure. So
we develop weapons.
Yeah.
And they're very sophisticated weapons.
Yes.
And we probably can't know how sophisticated our weapons are because that kind of thing is classified.
Correct.
But when the arms trade, we keep our best weapons for ourselves. We would give and sell our second best weapons to the Israelis, and then we would sell our third best weapons to their Muslim enemies, and thereby control who is dominant. Of course, the Israelis, they'll take our second best weapons and they'll even improve them beyond what our own engineers had designed them to do, and fly them better and use them better because the Israelis are so sharp this way. And so, so it helps our GDP. It helps us to maintain a certain amount of control about who's on top, and at least militarily. So what's the downside that you just said? The cost of them?
It's the cost of them. And the downside is that at some point countries start to use them as a result of having lots of them. And it's not that, I understand it's a complicated structure to keep, we've had some small, very hot wars, but not a global war. And that's been for the last 70 years, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's not neat and clean
Never
the way you try to keep it that way. I understand that.
Yeah.
But but there are lots of arms out there circling around the globe.
Okay, so let's say we stopped. So say we put in, I don't know, Bernie Sanders or somebody goes into the White House and he says, "We're going to stop this. No more." Who would take over? Who would fill the gap?
Well, they're never going to stop. That would be my
even if
my
Bernie's
first
in
thing.
charge.
I don't care. It won't matter. It's a jobs program. Lots of high-paying jobs in the arms industry. Lots of them.
Yeah.
And they have it spread out through. excuse me. They have it spread out through every congressional district. They are not stopping.
The French used to sell a lot of weapons. Of course, the Russians do too.
Oh, sure,
and
they
the
do.
Chinese.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, though it's.
I mean, the gap would be filled by someone.
Oh no, it'll be filled. That's true. That is true. That's the sad part of it. I'm talking about it more philosophically.
Yeah.
About that. It's
right.
That's sad that we're not. My view is we should be out to build a great civilization. That's what we should be doing. And
There's the email I sent you. I printed it off.
yeah.
Wait a minute.
Let me get I need my glasses, Tom.
There's some other notes that I had. Okay. So we got a presidential election coming up in what now? It'll be about 14, 15 months. That's getting closer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is getting closer.
Yeah, just over a year.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of candidates. It's probably, I'm sorry I made the print so small.
No, it's.
But that just to prove to you that I did send you
Oh,
that
no,
email.
hey, listen, you
Yeah,
told
he didn't
me you
get
did.
it. I was going to tell him some of the topics that we were going to bring up.
You told me you did, and I don't know why it didn't come up. But.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, it's one of the things I wanted to bring up is we were having a conversation back in 1988. What's that? That's 31 years ago, and in the presidential election cycle, and you were all excited because you had just been on a business trip somewhere, I think it was, and you heard a speech by Joe Biden, who was then a candidate for president, and you were all excited. And you said, I really, really like this guy.
He gave a great speech, and I think it was actually in 1984.
Was it?
Yeah.
All
And
right.
it was,
okay.
and it was in Augusta.
Oh.
And it was in Augusta. They had a thing. You remember?
Were you in the legislature? At the
I
time?
was not. No.
Okay.
I was
were
running
a lobbyist.
I was running atomic ski.
Okay.
With a friend of mine, Frank Hurt, of course. So at any rate, they had a thing called a straw poll. And they did those things back in those days where they used it as a fundraiser for the state party.
Oh, you called me about that. Go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
I was.
You were pushing a candidate.
No, I wasn't pushing a candidate. What I was doing was creating the Western Maine Uncommitteds, which was driving.
Fritz Hollings.
Fritz Hollings came.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people come.
Okay.
But I thought, we've got all these people paying attention to this. So that would have been actually in October '83. And we've got all these people paying attention to the state of Maine. We might as well get them out here in the willywags, in the rural areas.
That was
so,
I remember.
We created this thing.
Idea.
It was a good idea.
Yeah.
We got a lot of them to come and speak in Freiburg and Lovell and so forth. So anyway, and at that thing, straw poll, Joe Biden came and was a speaker.
Okay.
And he was like the keynote speaker.
Yeah.
And he just gave, it wasn't much on issues.
But he was running for president in '84 too?
No, he wasn't. No,
Okay.
he just came and was a keynote speaker.
All
he
right.
was not running.
Okay, all right.
And he gave a great speech. And he gave an absolutely great speech. And I thought, wow, this is an interesting guy. I had never seen him before, And
You were excited about him, I remember.
Yeah, well, he was a baby boomer. A couple of years older, 3 years older than me, and I thought, wow, this guy, that's a great speech. He's a guy to watch in the future.
Okay, what do you think of him now?
Well, I don't think he's a bad guy, but he's not my guy. I don't know who my guy is. Actually, he wasn't my guy when he did run for president. Was it '92 or so, or I
88. 88 and maybe I don't know, maybe 92.
Yeah, I don't know. In '92, I was actually a Paul Tsongas guy, but Joe Biden by that time, I don't know it. I just wasn't. He wasn't doing it for me.
Does anybody interest you in the Democrat field?
Oh yeah, I've got interest
in.
Well, I like Andrew Yang. Mm-hmm. I think Andrew Yang's a very interesting guy. Mm-hmm. He's talking about a lot of things I think we ought to be talking about, things that are happening in the future.
Business-wise?
Business-wise.
Automation,
automation, things that I've been actually thinking about and teaching in my classes for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is that in another 10 years, 47% of the jobs that existed in 2010 will be gone through automation. Some of them, a little bit of them will be gone from international outsourcing, but advanced manufacturing techniques, they're the things that are really taking them away. And also, but here's the other thing. So in 2014, China overtakes us in the value of manufactured goods. In 2020, according to the American Association of Manufacturers, we'll take over again because of advanced manufacturing techniques. So we're going to be making more products in value, merchandise goods in value, and we're going to be making them more efficiently, but we're not going to have a lot of jobs as a result of it.
Do you think that Andrew Yang would take as many, what I would call, leftist positions if he were not running as one of the field of pretty far left candidates now? Do you think that if he were an independent, let's say, that he would have a different, he'd be making different speeches and,
Oh, I don't
pounding
know.
different issues.
I don't know.
I have an idea he would.
Yeah, maybe. You know, he's. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I guess I understand.
Because he's running in the
Because he's
Democrat
running in
primaries,
there, and
therefore he
it
has
takes
to-
him a little further to the left
Yes,
than
yes.
he might normally be.
That's my point.
I don't know him well enough to know that. I don't.
Yeah.
Were you? Did you do the interview with the Conway Sun?
I didn't go to that
I
one, no.
wished. You know something. I really wished I had. Called them up and asked if I could just sit in a corner.
Yeah.
Because I would like to see what he has to say.
Yeah, yeah.
but
And Mark
he's-
Garang, when he sat where you are, was all excited about it. He really liked
Yeah,
that
I
after
thought
that
he did.
interview. Yeah.
So he's an interesting guy.
Mm.
I like Elizabeth Warren for a lot of her, populism on the Wall Street's not a place that I'm a big small medium-sized enterprise guy, big business. Okay, fine, you can scale things, and I get what your position has to be, but I don't like sending money to Wall Street if I can help it, because I think they'll wind up
that issue.
taking it,
Okay.
and not fairly. I won't use the word cheat, but that's what I think.
Elizabeth Warren has a column in the Sun today,
Yeah.
and it's on global warming.
Uh-huh.
The euphemism now is climate change.
Yeah.
A plan for climate, as they said. And so the pull quote here, I'll read.
Yeah.
As president, I promise you that we will confront climate change, but we won't do it by turning our backs on the communities of color. And the most vulnerable are on workers employed in the fossil fuel industry. All right, well, she makes a case, she pounds two issues here, climate change, and then she talks about how there's a racist angle to climate change.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that that there are a lot of developing countries that are going to have a harder time building their economies and industrial economies. We had an opportunity to build it and not worry about what they call the externalities. We built our economy on that basis. Yeah, carbon, and not just carbon, but other chemicals and so forth, not properly taking care of them until our economy got big enough to start paying for environmental management and so forth. So there is that side of it. But I think I understand where the oil and fossil fuel industry is coming from, and because if you look at there's something like, in terms of fossil fuels, there are proven reserves of somewhere between 28 and 29 trillion dollars in the ground still.
That are now accessible with fracking
That are
technology
accessible
and so
because
forth.
of all kinds of
Yeah.
different new technologies.
Yeah.
And I think they can't burn it all, or the planet's going to heat up. That's my own feeling, which it's not just mine, it's the United States Navy's, it's the Department of Defense. Department of Defense says it's our number one national security interest. So they're going to have to cut back on it. But I see why they're fighting so hard, because if I think about it with a business hat on, then I look at the value of their shares. It's held up by their assets, and their proven assets are included in this is proportionately some measure of the $28 trillion in proven reserves. And if all of a sudden the stock market figures out that those might not all be burned, the value of the shares could take a tumble. And what would that do? And so I started looking into this, because I thought, there's got to be somebody else other than me thinking about this. And I started looking into it, and who's looking into it? The insurance companies, because I thought the insurance companies they're gonna cover the downside. They're gonna cover that risk somehow. And sure enough, Lloyd's of London has been holding big discussions about this. So it's, it's complicated, and it's not all clear one way or another, but there's going to be pain involved. I think that we can count on that.
She endorses the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Now, how do you define that? Well, they hem and haw about it. It came up first introduced by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was a newly elected congresswoman from New York City. I saw something very interesting. She has her chief of staff, who recruited her to run for Congress, is the last name Chakrabarti. He's an Indian American. Had been a high-tech guy out in San Francisco area, and then he got into politics when Bernie Sanders announced his candidacy and got all excited about Bernie.
Okay.
And then Bernie lost, and so he then decided he was going to recruit people like AOC.
Okay.
And he did recruit 12 candidates. She's the only one who won. But along the way, while after she had won the primary, which was essentially there winning the general as well, we knew she'd win, they also endorsed the other three in the so-called Quad, which would be Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley from Boston, and the third one, Ilhan Omar. So they were in his stable, so to speak. And he's a radical leftist, and it takes one form of one to know one. He really is. He wants to change the world. So here's what he said about, now speaking to Jay Inslee's campaign manager, Jay Inslee, governor of Washington, his whole issue was climate change, and that is the biggest issue.
Yes.
So he said to him, his chief, he says, this is really, our Green New Deal is not about climate change. It's about taking over the economy. Now that statement, I thought, oh boy, that's an interesting thing. Oh, that's really what it's about, huh? And then he was the former chief of staff for AOC. Very shortly after that came out, I read it in the Washington Post magazine. Now, comment?
Well, my comment is that, I'm what you would call, I was a strong environmentalist when I was a legislator. I was involved in the bottle bill, in all kinds of clean air, clean water legislation that was going before the Maine legislature. We passed a lot of landmark stuff in the middle 70s when I was a member. I was 27. And I always have thought, and we couldn't have done that, quite frankly, without rural Republican legislators. They gave the votes that were necessary, and I understood.
You were a Democrat.
I was a Democrat,
but you worked with a lot of Republicans.
We worked with a lot of Republicans.
Okay.
And to pass that legislation, we could not have passed it without them. And the Senate was, we were strongly Democratic in the House, but the Senate was strongly Republican. And Jim Longley was governor for the 4 years. An
independent, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, he was an independent.
He was a real independent, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, he was a real,
unlike
he was.
What, say Angus King, who's really a Democrat, calls himself an independent. Okay.
Well, I wouldn't. I would hesitate to tell Angus what he thinks he is.
I would.
But you could.
Yeah, okay.
I've known Angus King as long as I knew Jim Longley. Actually, I've known him longer because, unfortunately, Governor Longley passed away.
Yeah.
But at any rate,
you were talking about the bottle bill and various other legislations.
I think that the great support for that came from rural Maine, because we grew up where there was clean water, where we could drink right out of the river. We didn't have to worry about those things, and we hiked. It was our backyard, and it's still what drives me.
We loved it.
We loved it.
Yes.
And it's what drives me. So it's driven me to the point where I thought, I need to buy timberland, and I need to buy timberland where I have 4 goals. One is to make a small dividend on it, because it's an investment. 2 is to have a place where animals live. 3 is to collect some carbon. And 4 is where my neighbors and I and my family, where we can walk on it, hunt on it, fish on it, cross-country ski, ride a snowmobile on a piece of it. You know, that's what I thought we ought to do, and then we invested in solar as well, and but I didn't hire somebody else to do the solar. Actually, I hired a friend of mine, and we built the whole thing, put it all in, went on YouTube, saw how to do it, and did it for half the price. So I think that we all need to take responsibility for this. As individuals, we need to take responsibility and do what we can to improve the environment, not denigrate it anymore, and realize that we depend on it. The earth will be here whether we're here or not.
Do you think that the squad and others in the Democrat Party, now Ed Markey came right out, you know, as soon as AOC published this Green New Deal and had an outline with it. And he jumped right on board. Well, now his job is threatened because he's going to be primaried by Patrick Kennedy, who was a congressman from Massachusetts. You probably heard that.
I didn't know he'd officially announced, but
well, he hasn't officially announced, but it looks pretty certain.
Yeah.
So, yes, but as far as, do they want to take over the economy? Do they want to? I mean, this Chakrabarty is, you know, he was a Bernie Sanders guy, and Bernie Sanders is a socialist. And so, what do socialists do? I mean, this government-run economy. And that, I think, is what, and most young Democrats, and I forget exactly the parameters of the demographic, but 18 to 34, I'm thinking is what I read. Most of them are socialist, believe in socialism. And so, and AOC would be their hero now. And one more thing. Tom Perez, who was the chairman of the Democrat Party, as soon as AOC was elected, he said she is the future of the Democrat Party. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I suppose that hasn't been determined yet. Would be my answer. She may be, she may not be. Who knows? Lots of things change quickly, and it all depends on a number of different things. But I think I find, you know, my students, you know, like you, looking at your students and what they were thinking back when you were a school teacher, I see my students who are very environmentally aware. They are that, and they want to do the right thing. And they, I take some, you know, some interest in the way they see starting a business. And they do want to start a business that can be successful and where they can make a living. I always tell them that money isn't the goal, that doing something you love is the goal, and being good at it, money will take care of itself. And maybe some of you will be, you know, a Zuckerberg or a Steve Jobs, and maybe some of you will just make a living, and that will be okay. And maybe you'll supply a job, or maybe 2 jobs, and that will be really good for the community. But for me, business has to remember why they were started in the first place. They were there, they were given certain rights and privileges to perform a public good as well. Not just there for the benefit of the shareholders only. Yes, they're there for the benefit of the shareholders, but they were there in their early days. If you read Adam Smith and you look at what they were looking at and look at the way they were formed in the beginning, they would do a project and then be out of business. They would do a project that had to be done. So, and small business does do that, whether they think of it that way or not, because they're members of the community. They support the Little League.
That's an important
distinction.
You know what I mean? Yes.
Yes.
Right.
They are members.
They're small enough to know the community, which is people.
Yes.
The people who
and care about the people who work for them.
Yes.
They don't want a small business. I can't think of a small business person that I know that wants to have health insurance for themselves and not for their people. What they will sometimes is not have health insurance for themselves or for their people. but they don't certainly want to be the ones having health insurance, and then they've got a neighbor who's a good person working for them and a good employee, and then they don't have the insurance. So they see it through a different lens, and that's how I see it. I see it through the same lens. We treated the Atomic Ski USA employees. We had performance-based compensation for all of the reps and myself and Frank, and we had we paid our people a living wage, and we made sure they had health insurance.
And if your employees are not happy, you won't be happy
You
either,
won't be
right?
happy.
Because they'll make you miserable. They're going to be an adversarial relationship instead of a cooperative one. And you're not all in this together. It's business versus, management versus union, or some kind of facsimile.
And we were successful. We were very successful.
Will be, won't they?
Yes, they will.
Yes.
And so I see my students. My students are great. They understand some of this. I don't know why, but
How long
they
have
do.
you been doing that at Freiburg Academy?
12 years.
Okay, so then you've seen enough.
I've seen
where
enough.
And you live in the community, so
Yes.
then how have they become entrepreneurs?
Well, I'll tell you what.
right.
I think of Silas Eastman. He's one of my students.
Sure.
I don't know if I should say
Great
his
runner.
name on.
Great runner. I think
He's
it's all
a
right,
great
yeah.
kid. And he was
He was
great
homeschooled,
student.
so I didn't have him.
He was homeschooled for the
Yeah.
first 8 grades,
Yeah.
and then he went to the academy.
Yeah. But I did meet him, and I met his parents. And I think
his
I put on a little seminar, and they came to it, and I met them.
Well, Steve,
He was a homeschooler.
Steve and I were. He was 2 years ahead of me at Freiburg Academy.
Yeah.
We went to high school together,
Yeah.
and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah.
And so.
So what's Silas doing? What sort of a business is he in?
So Silas went off and studied design at Colby, and he wrote a business plan during my class to have. I wanted to design fine furniture and build them. So we talked about how doing that in our community will help a dollar turn 7 times. That's what happens. You buy something from Walmart, it turns 2 or 3 times. But you build something right there. And so I save trees that Silas can use. He's in the process of building a 40 by 60 furniture factory up on his mom and dad's land.
Really?
Yes, and
I'll be darned.
he's bootstrapping it.
Good.
And he's already building. I bought 2 Adirondack chairs from him. And
What is he working with, just an aside?
Pardon me?
What kind of wood?
On the Adirondacks, cedar.
Cedar.
So we don't have cedar around here.
Yeah, yeah.
So he had to buy cedar outside
Right.
of here.
Go ahead.
But and then I had a couple of kids. One kid lived in Freiburg, and another kid in North Freiburg in the harbor.
Yeah.
And
The harbor.
and the harbor. And they were in the middle of college 2 years ago. They called me up and said, "We want to come and talk to you, if we could, Mr. Wilfong, about a business we've started." And I said, "In the middle of your just finished your sophomore years?" Yes. They came. They were in suits. They wore suits
To meet with you.
to meet with me, and they had a financial planning and advisory business that they had started. And I thought, wow, and it was a great business plan. They'd really thought it through. And, who knows whether they'll do that in the end. They're in business school, both of them. One's at Vanderbilt and one at Stonehill. And they're doing it. I had another kid.
Did they form a chapter of the Young Republicans while they were in there?
I don't know if they did that.
Did they bring
or
in
not.
any speakers that got shouted down?
You know something? I never talked to them about political affiliation. I think that's not fair for me to do that.
Yep.
But they do. They knew I was a Democrat, but I don't. I don't talk about.
They didn't
that.
hold it against you.
They didn't hold it against me.
I don't either, Jim.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
But
right.
I had another kid from Freiburg who came to me and said, "Do you mean I could do any business idea I had?" I said, "Yes." He said, "All right." Off he goes. And about 2 months later, he said, "Would you come down to the metal shop? And I want to show you something." I said, "Sure." So I went down there. He had built a mold that was about this tall and about this long and about this wide to make skateboards. And he had gone out, found the plans for making it, got exactly how the mold had to be designed using concrete, and he used hydraulic jacks, and he used what's known as a cold process. You know, in skis, we used a hot process and with molds that were pressurized. You know, he did a cold process because there wasn't a way to make a hot process. He sent away, got 7 different layers of wood that he could use, and the fiberglass and all the resins. And before the year was done, he'd made 3 or 4 skateboards. He'd gotten another kid that went to the academy who was a real good artist.
Yeah.
He did the
that's
graphics,
an important facet, isn't it?
and he had them sold before the end of the year.
Yeah, good for him.
And you know
Wow.
what? And that kid went off. He went first into 2-year associate's degree in business, and then went and got a 4 years degree, and he's off and sailing as a young business
Well, that's
person.
satisfying,
So
isn't it?
isn't that good?
Yeah, it is.
I think it's great.
It's you know, I taught most of my career in the same community.
Yeah.
And everywhere I go, you know, I'm Mr. McLaughlin, and I'm Mr. My name's Tom. You don't have to call me that anymore.
I know.
You know? But yeah, and it's a nice thing. And I
We-
still get letters from them, emails from them, whatever
It's
it
great.
is. And it is, and that's, you know, the pay wasn't good, but
Oh, no.
But the rewards are great.
The rewards are great.
Yeah.
And when you see them thinking about this, and they send me, and of course, I have kids from around the world too. I just had a kid.
Oh, right, at the academy, sure.
Yeah, and this
Yeah.
kid he was an Austrian. He wrote the best business plan, and the MBA student would have been pleased with this business plan. And he went to the London School of Economics, and he sent me a note. He keeps in contact with me via email. He sent me a note, said he wanted to come up this fall. He's going to school in Boston, getting his master's at the Sloan School at MIT. And so I hear from kids all around the world who I like it, and you know, they're thinking about starting their own businesses, and so
I'm going to switch gears.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. No,
I know.
that's
I
what
get
we're
excited
here for.
about this stuff. You know,
good.
so.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. It's let's see, where was I going with that? Oh, just before I saw you at the dump. It's one of the places we meet, you know, and we got into a conversation, as we so often do, and it was, the Mueller report was just about to be delivered, and I said he should never have taken the case. He should have known there was nothing there, and as it turned out, there was. You know, I don't think there was anything there. I don't think he even wrote the report. I think his staff did, that he appointed, and then that sort of came out when the House interviewed him, and he couldn't even remember what the heck was in the report. You know, what page was that on? And you know, and anyway.
Well, he's not a young guy anymore either.
No,
so.
He's not. But anyway.
But I trust his integrity.
So I don't.
Yeah,
I used to. I don't anymore. But okay. So it's gone. Now, the New York Times managing editor named Baquet, B-A-Q-U-E-T, which was not a familiar name to me.
No,
now, he had a staff meeting.
Okay.
And shortly after this, and it was picked up. Somebody had a recording device, and then Slate magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're
Yes, I am.
they're somewhat left of center magazine.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, published it. They transcribed it and they published it.
transcribed the letter.
The secret. Well, Baquet would not have wanted this out.
Oh.
His meeting with his staff, that the Mueller investigation was over, and that we're now going to refocus this paper to cover racism. It's no longer Russian collusion, it's now racism. And there's a few quotes here. Well, this is, "We built our newsroom to cover one story, and we did it truly well. Now we have to regroup and shift resources and emphasis to take on a different story.
Okay.
And then he introduced this, 2019 or 1619, which is focused on racism. And then, so we see Elizabeth Warren's column. She talks about climate change. She relates it to racism. She's pounding that theme. And all the Democrats are pounding that theme. And the New York Times is pounding that theme, that Trump is a racist. No longer is he a Russian agent or working with Russian agents. Now he's a racist. And so, and I'll...
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
The day Bob Mueller walked off that witness stand, which I just referred to in that hearing, where he didn't seem to know what he's talking about. Our readers who want Donald Trump to go away suddenly thought, holy shit, Bob Mueller is not going to do it. And Donald Trump got a little emboldened politically, I think, because, for obvious reasons. And I think the story has changed. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about started to emerge like 6 or 7 weeks ago. And we're a tiny bit flat-footed. So then he says, now we're going with this. For the next couple of years until the election, we're going to pound racism. Now, that to me is not seeing all the news that's fit to print. And it's not,
Well, I don't think any of these news organizations should be teaming up, quite frankly. Whether it be Fox News, MSNBC, New York Times, the LA Times, Chicago Tribune, I really don't care. Sinclair Broadcasting. I think what we deserve is to get the news that's there. I mean, is there always going to be a slant? Yes, because whoever picks what's going to go into the newscast is going to wind up slanting it. But I think back to the 1800 campaign between Jefferson and Adams. And I don't know if you've ever I've read a book on it, and you really want to see the news so-called media at the time.
Pretty biased.
They were awful.
Yeah.
Just awful. On both sides.
Yes.
And
but mostly really on Adams' side, weren't they?
Well, no. Jefferson had Adams was, his stuff was bad, but the Jefferson papers were equally as bad. It was, you read it and you would think, if you had the American people read this book on this campaign, they would all of a sudden go, oh my Lord, it's been going on for 200 years.
It was ever thus.
Yeah, it was ever thus.
We don't have much time left.
Yeah,
but it's
So I think the news should always be straightforward as possible, and let us make up our own minds.
I'm with you on that.
That's my view.
Let me ask you this. It just occurred to me as you were speaking, and that is there, who comes closest to that? What media outlet there comes closest to that?
I do not know.
I don't really know any. I won't say, like, you mentioned Fox News, and I mentioned New York Times, MSNBC,
well, no,
and so forth.
I didn't just mention
They all
them.
have,
Yeah.
but I understand, and they all have a bias, every one of them, in one direction or another. And, but I'm thinking, on Fox News, whenever I can, between 6 and 7, I try to watch Bret Baier.
Okay.
Do you ever watch him?
We get one channel.
Okay,
news
so you don't have cable.
In Stow.
All right, and so he comes close to doing straight news. Now the rest of the people on Fox, they have an agenda, and they don't try to hide it either.
No.
And
no,
not all
true.
the rest of them.
They preach to the choir.
They do, and but he does well, I think, in that way. And so I tend to watch him most of the time, to the exclusion. I can only watch one at a time. I don't watch a lot of television news.
Yeah.
Most of them I get my news from the internet. And then
I do,
and with that, I
myself.
can't find what I'd call a straight news outlet. So what I do is I read some on the right, and then I read some on the left, and then I try to, okay.
Where I always thought you got good straight news.
1 minute, go ahead.
Okay,
If you can wrap
good
up.
straight news is the Wall Street Journal. Now, the editorial page, you expect that to be right of center and so
business
forth.
oriented.
But business oriented, but you do get you do get straight news,
Yeah.
business-oriented news.
Yeah.
And so I think that historically hasn't been a bad model for just straight news. When I read the editorial page, then I know I'm reading something right.
Has this been fun?
Yeah, it has been fun.
Good. I
Yeah.
thought you'd like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it has been fun.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been fun.
So good. I
This
hope
is the way I hope people will sitting around their kitchen table,
Yeah.
will also treat one another.
I had fun today.
Yeah.
And I hope maybe in another month,
Yeah.
in 4 weeks from today,
Sure.
I'll give you some alerts.
That
here
would
and
be
there.
great.
It
Sure.
would.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I really enjoyed having you, Jim.
Thank
and
you.
I do hope,
I enjoyed
hope you come
enjoyed
back.
doing it, Thomas.
All right.
You take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.